There's a certain kind of horror that doesn't rely on jump scares or gore or shock value. It works by making you feel small, exposed, and constantly aware that something nearby is watching you, even when you can't see it. Enter Reanimal, which looks like it understands that kind of fear extremely well. And based on all of the previews, hands-on demos, first impressions, and early reviews across the industry, this might be the studio's darkest game yet. Let's get nerdy. Reanimal is a cinematic horror adventure from Tarsier Studios, the team best known for defining a very particular brand of atmospheric horror with Little Nightmares. But this is not a sequel in spirit or structure, and that distinction truly matters. You play as brother and sister trapped on a remote nightmarish island, searching for missing children while being relentlessly hunted by grotesque animal-like creatures. The game can be played solo with an AI companion or fully in co-op, and critically, the entire experience is built around dual character dynamics. Puzzles, traversal, and survival all assume vulnerability is shared, not divided. Where Little Nightmares leaned heavily on surreal metaphor and fairy tale abstraction, Reanimal appears far more grounded and physical. The world is less symbolic, less theatrical, and more openly hostile. This is not a place designed to unsettle you through implication alone. It actively resists your presence. There's no combat fantasy here, no sense of growing stronger over time. Instead, survival is about coordination, timing, and restraint. You move carefully, you observe constantly, and you react defensively. Early reviews consistently frame Reanimal as a deliberate attempt by Tarsier to strip away whimsy and lean fully into sustained dread, pushing their signature horror style into darker, more unforgiving territory. Across nearly all early coverage, one phrase comes up repeatedly when describing Reanimal's world: hostile. Not cursed, not haunted, hostile. This island does not exist to be explored safely or understood comfortably. Forests, shorelines, flooded interiors, and decaying industrial spaces feel less like curated levels and more like real environments that simply do not want you there. Compared to Tarsier's previous work, spaces are larger, more interconnected, and noticeably less linear, creating a constant sense of exposure. Several early reviews emphasize that traversal itself is a source of tension. Moving through the environment feels dangerous, even when nothing is actively happening, because the game trains you to assume that danger is always nearby. Sightlines are limited, sound travels unpredictably, and environmental clutter constantly obscures your understanding of what lies beyond. This is where Reanimal begins to feel closer to survival horror than cinematic platforming. You are not just solving puzzles, you are navigating spaces that feel occupied by unseen threats. The uncertainty of whether you are safe often proves more unsettling than the moments where danger is revealed. Importantly, the world design appears to encourage hesitation. Critics note frequent moments of stopping, listening, and reassessing before moving forward, and that pause and lingering doubt becomes part of the horror language. If the environmental pressure can sustain that ominous feeling of dread for a whole playthrough, the world itself will end up being Reanimal's most effective antagonist. Mechanically, Reanimal is built around cooperation, but not in a way most co-op games use it as relief. Here, having another character beside you does not make you safer. It makes you more fragile in a sense. Whether played solo with an AI companion or with a second player, nearly every system in Reanimal assumes shared vulnerability. Movement puzzles demand synchronization. Traversal frequently requires one character to assist or expose themselves while the other advances. And in encounters with enemies, coordination is less about execution and more about survival under pressure. Crucially, Reanimal does not give you tools to fight back. There is no escalation in capability, no gradual empowerment. You are not learning how to dominate the space, you are learning how to pass through it unnoticed. Critics repeatedly describe enemies as reactive rather than scripted. Creatures respond to sound, movement, and positioning, behaving less like traditional horror set pieces and more like predators occupying the same space. This shifts the gameplay emphasis towards patience and awareness rather than pattern memorization. What stands out is how often the game asks you to make uncomfortable choices. Do you move together and risk being seen, or split briefly to solve a puzzle faster? Do you wait in silence or push forward and hope the noise does not draw unwanted attention? Reanimal's gameplay does not seek to empower the player, it seeks to burden them, and early impressions suggest that tension is not just a byproduct of the system, but their explicit purpose. One of the clearest shifts identified across all early coverage is Reanimal's approach to horror itself. Where Little Nightmares relied heavily on surreal imagery and abstract metaphor, Reanimal's horror is far more literal and physical. The creatures you encounter are not exaggerated caricatures or symbolic figures. They feel biological, aggressive, and unpredictable. Multiple hands-on impressions describe monsters that behave like animals rather than obstacles. They roam, react, and pursue based on sound and proximity, rather than waiting to trigger scripted sequences. This gives encounters a volatile edge, where outcomes feel less pre-authored and more emergent. Sound design plays a critical role here. Distant movement, irregular breathing, and environmental noise blur together in ways that make it difficult to identify where the danger is coming from, or how close it truly is. Several reviewers singled this out as one of the most effective tools for sustaining fear. Importantly, Reanimal avoids spectacle-driven horror. There are no elaborate scare sequences designed to shock and release tension quickly. Instead, it is designed as such to have fear accumulate slowly, built through uncertainty and the constant sense that you are being observed. The horror here is designed to linger, and if sustained, it may prove far more unsettling than anything built on surprise alone. From a technical standpoint, Reanimal represents a clear step up in scale and density for Tarsier Studios. Built in Unreal Engine 5, the game benefits from more dynamic lighting, heavier environmental detail, and stronger material definition. But early reviews are careful to stress that this is not about raw graphical spectacle. Instead, the visuals serve mood first, clarity second, and fidelity last. Environments feel textured and physical. Wet surfaces reflect light unevenly, shadows swallow detail rather than showcase it, and spaces feel cluttered in ways that actively limit visibility. This reinforces tension, but it also places additional strain on camera behavior. Several hands-on impressions note occasional awkward framing, particularly when managing two characters in confined areas. These moments are in no way constant, but they stand out in a game where spatial awareness is critical. For all the confidence shown by the developer, Reanimal carries a few unresolved questions that could define its final reception. The most significant is sustainability. Can this level of tension be maintained across a full-length game without becoming exhausting? Slow traversal and constant vigilance are effective in short demos, but they demand careful pacing over time. There are also questions around systemic evolution, with no combat progression or traditional upgrades. The game relies heavily on environmental variety and enemy behavior to remain engaging. If those elements do not meaningfully evolve, repetition could become a serious concern. Finally, co-op remains a double-edged sword. While widely praised conceptually, it introduces complexity in camera control, AI reliability, and the moment-to-moment readability. None of these concerns undermine the game's premise, but they do place pressure on the execution. So then, based off of all of the early coverage, Reanimal looks like a confident and deliberate evolution of Tarsier Studios. It is darker, more grounded, and far less interested in charming the player than its predecessors. Where earlier works relied on surreal abstraction, Reanimal appears committed to sustained pressure, shared vulnerability, and a world that feels actively hostile rather than theatrically unsettling. The core ideas are strong, the atmosphere is cohesive, and the shift towards larger spaces and co-op driven tension suggests a studio willing to challenge its own formula rather than repeat them. That said, this is a game that will live and die on its execution. Camera control, pacing discipline, and systemic variety will determine whether its dread remains compelling or simply slides into monotony. And where in the case that most of these rough edges can be ironed out, Reanimal could stand as one of the most effective atmospheric horror experiences of its kind. Thank you so much for watching. Please like, subscribe, comment down below, share with your friends, and until next time, stay nerdy.